last meeting, and basically, so that everybody has some clarification, or if somebody's looking on the camera for the first time, they'll understand what the kind of lead into our discussions tonight is. The committee, the fiscal committee, was asked to review the costs and revenues of operating the town and the village as one entity to determine if there were any tax savings that would warrant proceeding. We chose to develop an analysis of what costs would have been in 2011 if there was a merged government, and therefore to find the savings, or more importantly, the impact on taxes. Other viable approaches could have been used. This was the one chosen. If the boards choose to continue, a projected yearly budget for the proposed start year of the merger must be developed. This budget must consider the impacts of retirement rates, which are going up 15 to 20% per year, plus medical insurance rates that are increasing 10 to 15%, the community appraised value going up and down, and other impacts on revenue and expenses. Any employee reductions identified in our study will reduce the actual savings even more because of rising individual employee costs. It has been pointed out that the sum totals of the figures do not agree, and this I believe is true. However, the real concern is the difference in tax rates, and for this I took, as identified in the report that we presented, the total expenses reported in the file budgets and the adjusted costs and revenues as reflected in our review. The totals of the charts were not used. Also, as an even greater potential impact was the way the village and the town handled expenses and committed income, but not paid or not received at the end of the year. They do it differently. The village sets up an encumbered account for expenses and also for income. However, the village identifies the amount due and the amount incurred per fund, and this does not identify what line item of the budget is impacted. It's only by the fund, an A fund, B fund, DA, DB, fire, all the rest of it. In addition, you must look at the previous year's figures the town determined the true income and expense in the year. In other words, what was the difference between encumbrances and anticipated income. And this was done in determining the tax rates. There are also adjustments that had to be made since the village operating year is June through May and town's January through December. This was very evident when looking at the fire expenses the town paid the village and looking at what village received. When we recognized the figures were not similar, and therefore for tax comparison the town rate for fire money was added, but the money received from town is not in the spreadsheet. Also, may be similar instances that have not been identified throughout the analysis, but there may be some. It is our intent to review with those present or submitting in writing specific questions or comments. The committee also make reductions or increases on their own in the projected savings or income as a result of those comments and those outside the committee. Our desire is to provide the town and village boards the best judgment we can on what the budget and the tax rate impacts if there was one government for our community. Our review tonight will cover from auditor down through
building contractual.
Traffic control, yes, down through traffic control. All right. We will be identifying tonight where there are projected to be employee reductions. We are not identifying any specific people. And there's one thing that I've checked back, and it's been pretty consistent in relation to the town and so on in the village. There's about a 6 to 8 to 10% attrition rate in the town. For example, the town employees, including those in the buildings and grounds that report out of the town building, or at least they did when I was a supervisor 16 years ago, but I think there were 14 or 15 people. There were only two. There were only two people that were there when I retired, okay? And also, in some of the positions, there have been 3 or 4 rollovers. So the 6 to 10%, I think is pretty consistent, and I think we should recognize that in any of our deliberations. Now, the first thing we're going to handle tonight is there were a bunch of questions that we received, or clarifications, and Sally's got them there, and Sally's going to let us know what they were.
Yep, let me just get the revenue sheet, because I don't think everybody has it.
What's this?
Is this our revenue?
Oh, yes, okay, fine. I'll hang up the revenue.
No, don't, just hold it up.
Just hold it up.
Yeah,
I knew I could find the function.
Very quick.
Okay.
First question that came up and needs to be clarified was snow removal on this line. This is the income the village and town clerks. This is clerk snow removal, okay, fees. The second snow removal, which is A2302, is only the A2302. Only the village collects it, because only the village goes out if you haven't plowed or shoveled, and they actually do it and you're billed for it. So those figures are correct and as they are. Next one.
Can I just ask you about that? I didn't get to ask Nancy, but I asked Michael Zeeler, and he said that aside from the $50 per location, that whatever other money is collected is basically turned around and spent because they hire an outside firm to clear the snow. So that it's not really revenue.
It's still revenue as reflected in the way village books are kept.
But it's balanced.
It balances.
Expenditure, which might be equivalent.
And it can go up and down depending upon the year and the snow you have. Okay? And how many people, okay, but it's still paid. And if you fail to do what you're supposed to do, you will be billed by the village. Okay? You don't pay the outside provider, you pay the village, it's a revenue.
Yes, and you have to handle it, Andrea, that way.
And you have to handle it that way.
You can't handle it as a in and out transaction, okay? Because all the transactions have to be audited and go through the village books. I mean, if you were to say, okay, this is a encumbrance when you pay encumbrance when you had somebody shovel and you paid the guy and you wait for John Jones to pay you the money, and then you credit that money when it comes in against the encumbrance that you paid for the guy. Can't do that. Can't do that with town and county books. Okay, you got to say here's the income and expense.
Okay.
Because that would make it. Excuse me. That would make it not a seeable transaction, and that's a no-no.
I understand that. It has to be seeable.
I didn't understand the first one.
This is clerk's fees. So it's not just, there is a
fines,
fee.
You mean?
It's like a fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So now we're down to chips. A3501. As you see, the village in 2011 is 0, and the town has a figure. CHIPS is Consolidated Highway Aid, and for some reason, the village did not apply for it in 2011. Years before, years after, yes. And for 2012, the figure for CHIPS that would be the village only is $93,392. So, you see, it was a mistake. That would be a revenue that we should have tried to get and didn't. All right?
Well, it didn't happen in 2011,
Well, in 2000 and 2013, it's, I think,
we'll
say it's about the same figure.
Yet, I'm sure. Yeah.
Okay. We did remove from the expenditure side, the village landfill expense. That came up and you weren't sure.
We
And
did
we
the
did.
landfill expense, okay, but
Yeah. We showed
I'm
it
not, we removed the revenue, we did remove it from the
It's
expense.
balanced on both sides,
Okay, fine,
okay?
didn't know that.
For those of you who weren't here, gross utility taxes, which is only available to a village form of government. Let me find it. Well, it's here. No, not, oh, there it is. A1130. We had just doubled it for the town. Last week we talked about increasing it 2.5 times. It may even be a lot higher than that because in the village we're now having gas lines installed. That's a gross utility tax in. Okay.
But for 2011, that wouldn't have been, it may be,
No.
it wouldn't have been factored,
No.
adjusted, yeah.
It would, that's why we only doubled it
Yes, that's
for
right,
the
yeah.
town. County, non-property tax distributed by the county. A1120. Ray Parker asked that question, he's not here. If you're listening, Ray, that line is all sales tax, which only the town gets. The village does not collect sales tax, it's not allowed to. That figure, which we show, is totally $210,212. But the trick with this is that it's an accrual based, so the town probably does not collect that till the year after. In other words, they say, okay, 2011, this is the sales tax for a new Paltz, but they pay it in 2012.
So this is really a 2010 tax receipt,
This would be
okay.
the 210 moved to 211. I think that's everybody's questions for clarifications from last week. I think so. Okay, I'll continue to take notes for this week.
Alright. Okay. The first item up here that we're coming to is the auditor. This is, today we have 2 sets of books, and the village actually paid $26,800 and the town $20,000. Total of $46,900, and we figured that with 1 set of books, basically 1 set of books, there would be a reduction of $14,900, okay? Rather than 46, it would come down to 32. You need 1 basic audit. Yes, there's an audit would have to be done on some town figures, but it would be very minor, right? Because almost all the expenses are there. Now, this next thing, and I put this together so we don't have to, so it makes it a little bit easier for people, I hope.
Where do you want to
This is a whole series of things which are financial, personnel, and all that type of stuff. And what I've done to make it all hopefully easier understood by people, and I apologize, I am not an artist. I never claimed to be. And I always got somebody else to do charts when I was in business, not myself. But unfortunately, that was not the case today. I didn't have anybody else. And what we've done is we've taken what I've done is taken A13304, 3030.4, A13401.1, A13225.1, A1380.4, A1410.1, and A1430.1, and the total 2011 expenses for those items were $433,502. Now, we combined the dollars, if you want to look over there, the other fund, and we projected that those group of activities, which basically are town clerk expenses, they are the treasurer, there are the budget officer, their personnel expenses. We projected that cost that it would be $199,000, a reduction of $122,000. So, to try to understand how we could come up with those figures, this is the present personnel covered in the town and in the village. The town has 2.5 per people in the clerk's office. They have 1.5 people in the treasurer budget office. They have 1 person in personnel, payroll. That's the town. Town has 1.5 people in the clerk's office, 3.5 in the budget and treasurer's office, and no personnel, and payroll is handled by the treasurer and the budget office. So now I've tried to look at what the responsibilities of those offices were and what the changes would be. The town has tax collection. They send out bills and they get them back. So the county actually sends them out, but they have to record, they have to take all the documentation and send it back. The village sends out the bills and collects them. So in a consolidated government, we have 1 tax collection, not 2. Water and sewer fees. There are water fees in the village and in the town. And I found out in talking and trying to find out that thing, that actually the water and sewer data collected today is all collected in the village or by the village operation. The village sends the information to the town for the town employees. The town then builds their things and then pays the village back. So basically, if you have one operation, you wouldn't do that transfer of some of the documentation to the town and the town having to, somebody else having to bill it out. You would just use the same billing system as you have in the village today. The budget. We're looking at a budget that the town has to do and the village has to do. You'd have 1 budget, 1 accounting system basically, and there's a 50% or more reduction in the accounts you have to keep track of. It's probably near 60%, but anyway. As far as payroll, the village uses a payroll system. And in the payroll system, when the information, once it's set up by employee, they send it in and the checks come back. I don't know whether they use Payless or what the other one is. But anyway, the town actually does it all by themselves. And the beauty of an operation, if you use the village payroll system, is once the system's set up, that's the big cost. That's the big cost for Payless, okay, or whoever they're using. And you add an additional employee or take additional employee off for a minimum amount of money. In this village clerk's office is the mayor's secretary. Well, we've had a secretary that we left up there, combined town and village operation. So of course, there's no need for this responsibility within this group of people in a consolidated meeting. You have meetings of the boards, which you got to keep minutes of. You got to record them. You got to send out notices of them, and all of that type of stuff. You've got, I say 50%. Well, the way things are going now, it's probably 75% less. but basically, 1 board instead of 2 boards. And licenses. Well, you're going to have to issue the same amount of licenses, okay? Dog licenses, marriage licenses, fishing licenses, and licenses for garbage collectors, and I don't know what the village, other licenses the village do, but
vendors.
Vendors licenses, yeah, that's right. If you have games of chance, I guess they both do that. Okay, that's the only one they do. But the point is this: consolidated, if you need a license, you got one place to go. I mean, who can remember? Oh, okay, I live in the village, but I got a dog license. Does I don't go to the village, or go to the town? Well, you gotta go to the town. They don't issue dog licenses in the village.
No.
Okay, so our projection, when we looked at these people, said the clerk's office, we think it can get rid of 2.5 people, down to 2.5. The treasurer, 4.5, 4.25. Personnel and payroll, a half, to a total of 7.5 people from what it was a 10. That's a reduction of 2.5 people, something like that.
2 3/4.
What?
You've got 2 3/4 there.
Well, I made a mistake then. I thought that okay, 2 and change that. Just
2.5.
2.5. Okay.
That was that.
All right, 2.5. Now, actually, I know why I did that. I had 2.75 because today, this operation in the village handles the water and the sewer costs, and the water and the people do. Okay, the people do, and the water and sewer would be really billed out. Would be their cost would be out in the water and sewer department. Water and the sewer line items. Now, so we're looking at a 2.5. The savings somewhere between 115 and 120,000 in salaries, and the balance is, you know, paper, notes, charts, notices of meetings, all of that type of stuff, and that's how we projected that 122,000 reduction. Now, questions?
That's benefits, salary.
Benefits. Now, you're right. We have to keep track because benefits. There are reduction of benefits, so no question about that. But as we identified last week when we talked about, you don't have a mayor, you have a mayor, but you don't have a supervisor, okay? So those reductions, okay, we'll talk about when we get to medical costs, which are a separate line, when we talk to retirement costs. We'll try to keep track of those as we go through here, and so we get there and we can say, well, we're looking at 3 people, 5 people, 7 people, whatever it is, to reduce, or actually try to do as a salary, because you always have Social Security too, and Medicare, okay, reductions, yes.
So I guess from a practical standpoint, my question is, should that line, those numbers be noted as salary only, C benefits for?
Yeah, well, okay, yeah, but, you know, maybe we should do that, and I thank you for bringing that up, okay, because, yeah, and I think I mentioned that last week, when we had to keep track as we go through this as reanalysis, because I'll be frank with you, okay, that when we got to that particular questions, okay, we just took a percentage off. We said, I think it's 8%, but, you know, we'll be more precise when we go through this way, and it may be only 5, and it may be 10. I don't know what it is. We'll have to see. We'll have to adjust. Yes?
I think that I heard Nancy in one of the videos say it was paychecks that's being used, that the village uses. And I'm familiar with paychecks, and they charge by the check. And if you expand from 30 employees to 50, you're paying 20. Now maybe you can negotiate some, but I've interacted with paychecks for many, many years, and that's not, aside from negotiating.
What was the setup?
rate,
What was the setup fee? What was the setup fee? Okay, for to set up your building initially.
No, they don't charge a setup fee. If they do, it's not that much. It's really a per
Well, that's
payroll
when I've
fee.
been told. No, I pretty appreciate that. I have not dealt with them specifically. It's what the village clerk told me and the previous village clerk told me. So I have to have. G. Palucci said did not agree with your statement. Okay, and that's what the present village clerk says. So. You know, I understand that this is my knowledge, okay, and that's why that analysis.
I think you're both saying maybe the same thing, and maybe not. Because I've dealt with paychecks in other organizations. There is a basic setup fee I don't know what you consider minimal or maximum, the setup fee is independent, because what they're doing is setting up the way you remove benefits, add benefits. So the big cost is up front, okay, the setup itself. And then you're correct, because it is by check in that sense, but that is not,
No, my experience is it's by, the big cost is the ongoing recurring cost.
that's not been
So,
my
okay, that's-
experience.
Okay,
And that's,
well,
and I understand
my
what
experience
Dave,
is in private industry, enterprise, so it's different.
they make,
Ira, do you have anything to say on this?
Yeah, I used a similar system, and we paid per person, not per check. In other words, if we had, in my case, 300 employees, it was X amount of dollars per employee per year, and that covered the checks, that covered the W-2s, the W-3s, and all that other thing. It wasn't per check. It was a flat fee for X time, whatever that was. It was like, we had 300 employees at $10 an employee per month, and that was it, yeah.
Well, that would go to kind of the same basis
Yeah.
as what I was describing. But when you had to run extra check runs for some reason, they wouldn't add cost. But
We
that's
never had to run
that's
any,
minimal.
we never had to run any
Oh,
extra,
okay.
that's all I had
But
to
in
do
any
is
case,
not make payroll on
What you're
time.
saying, it would be proportional, so if you're
Yeah.
adding, if you're adding more people on, you're paying more, so there's more of a, whatever that would be, a 0.4 cost, like the contractual cost, if you're expanding.
But
So there's an amount there that you're trading off. If you're getting rid of the town payroll, personnel,
you're probably
and you're
gaining
moving it
because
over
the
to-
salary
to,
of the
to
town
a-
personnel,
but if you
Uh,
move it
payroll
over
Fine,
to,
is
okay, listen,
higher
what we'll do
than
is go
paychecks.
back, I will go back both to the information that I can put it down as a question. I will go back
we
to,
will,
Nancy, and I will go back to, Gene Galucci, okay, and he told me the same thing, and, have it clarified.
Thanks.
Was that? I don't know that, that's the information we worked with. If it was different, it was different, but I appreciate you in there. And they may have a different arrangement for corporate, but I was told that if you have 40 people or if you have 100 people, yeah, it's a little different, but it's not much cost. Now, this is completely different from what you're telling us, and, that was our information, and we
There
had.
is somewhat of an offset cost, because even if however the system may or may not work, we'll be eliminating the cost of doing the payroll in-house.
yes.
And there's a certain, there's a
Right,
cost for
I'm
the
just
check.
saying there's something else to add here.
And the fact that we had 300 employees, because they were able to manipulate with the taxes, you had 3 days to send them in, they would hold them for a day and roll it over. We were able to get a cheaper rate. So the larger the group, the more tax money they collect for you and hold on to for their 2 days. That, it's all in the negotiations, and every company is different.
Right.
I mean, a company that has 1,000 employees, I guarantee didn't pay the kind of rate I had to pay.
Right.
Well, that's true. It may be that this is too high. That's 4.25. It should be 4. Maybe it should be 3.
but
something
the
like that.
fact is, this is a snapshot. It's not out there, it's a snapshot of what it looked like in 2011. I think you bring up a very good point to think about for the future, because there are now software programs,
Yeah, but within this snapshot, when you think about how it would work in a,
right,
if you went back to 2011.
right,
and,
we're gonna find out.
and you were using paychecks, all I'm saying is there's an extra charge
Yeah.
in there if you're trading off a person
Okay, well,
doing the payroll
all right, we'll try to
in-house,
get a
there's-
further clarification
Okay.
there. Okay.
Mhm.
No, you're absolutely correct. There is an additional
Yeah.
charge, and what the
Yes,
offset would
Vicki.
be was only a guess on our part.
Vicki, yes.
It seems to me that all this work is really important, but it doesn't necessarily mean that if we go to referendum and we vote in favor of consolidation, people will get their pink slips.
No.
It seems to me that there's going to be quite a period of transition and melding staffs and functions that will take some
Well,
significant
what I say,
time.
Vicki,
Do you
what I'm
feel
saying
that
is, that,
is
you know, there's
correct?
6 to 8, 10% that leave everything, okay? It would be my recommendation, okay, my recommendation to both the town and the village boards, okay, that they consider that between now and when, you know, if consolidation happened, okay, if in fact somebody leaves and they hire somebody, okay, they should alert the people that they're hiring that this exposure exists, okay, that they may, you know, if consolidation, your job may disappear, okay. I think in fairness to anybody you hire today, you've got to say that, but the turnover without that has been significant, and you know, it's just the way it is. They retire, they decide to go back to school, they decide they're going to go off to their husband's or their spouse, or they get married, and they're going to move to Timbuktu and so forth, and that's the thing. Yes.
And I'm assuming, building on that, and what Vicki is saying, is that, I'm making up numbers. If you have 4 people leave by attrition,
Yeah,
because
sure.
by choice, and you have 4 people who are in slotted other jobs and the job is eliminated, those people may be able to move over to
Absolutely,
fill
they may, and they may not want to
positions.
take that job. It's just all
But, I
that
mean,
there's
there are
possibility.
many
But
ways
you
to
know,
solve it.
I'm saying, you know, I'm not may not people appreciate, but I personally don't feel that the town or the village is responsible. Their job is not to hire people. They're not. They're responsible to the voters to deliver the best service they can for the least amount of money. Okay, if they're responsible for jobs for people, they're doing a damn poor job, frankly. And okay, now
Got one more question on this.
sure.
So here, the clerk's office is 4 being reduced to 2.5.
That's right.
And on our sheet here, which was, you know, where the clerk's line was broken out from the.
We combined them all
various-
together. Okay.
Right, but before it was combined, it was a single line, and it says reflects one full-time clerk, 1 full-time deputy, and 2 part-time deputies, which is 3, not 2.5. So what changed there in your mind in terms of that?
What might change? Okay, I think that we didn't realize that the responsibility to collect taxes, it remains in the village, the treasurer's office. Okay,
And the town doesn't.
the town clerk does it. Okay, I think we didn't take into consideration that the village clerk, you know, the village clerk's office is really one of those people that's the secretary to the mayor. Okay, and you know, and try to go back and look at, frankly, okay, when we did this, okay, we didn't have all the data that we had needed, possibly needed, of how many people were in each thing. I got this in the last couple of weeks, okay, to see, you know, are we reasonable? And that's what this relook with help with you and all the people here is to see, you know, are we way off or is this reasonable? Okay, and that's what our intent is, and thank you for bringing up that particular question that you asked, and we'll get an answer for that. Okay. Anything further here? Okay. Now let's see here.
Oh, I do have a question, Dave, sorry.
Okay, fine.
The personnel committee,
Personnel committee.
for, that worked on the personnel issues related to possible
Yeah.
consolidation. You're looking at it from the numbers perspective. Is there any, you know, sort of cross current there between the 2 committees?
You're talking about the Human Resources Committee?
Yeah.
The way that worked was The Human Resources Committee came up with a recommendation based out there that they thought was, okay. It did not take into account, because it started, all these committees started last June. The town budget was not adopted till October. Okay. The town budget, and Kitty, you're here, and so if I say something, please correct me. The town budget reflected a reduction. They closed out the buildings and grounds
Right.
and moved it all into DPW, okay? The Human Resources Committee, as I understand it, and I asked this question when they made their report, was the figures that you presented, did they at all reflect, and do they reflect, what then became the town budget? And the answer was no. So the additional part of that is that the Finance Committee reported out later than any of the other committees, in case those committees were making recommendations that had financial impact. But the Finance Committee had already understood that any recommended in this snapshot picture, which really isn't what the picture is going to be out there, because as we all said last week, and I think people now understand, I hope, that for the referendum, should it be presented to the community, has to have an outside accountant, if you will, whatever the boards decide, 3-year cost and savings projection in the referendum itself. The whole purpose of this study committee, and we're sorry we had to use 2011 figures, but that's the actual reality we had, not of a budget, but of real expenditures of the village and the town. Looking at it, did it make any sense to pursue the question financially of consolidation? And the answer, as best we believe and feel that we can show, is yes, based on 2011, which is already almost 2 years ago, that the savings suggest consolidation is a reality to consider for this community.
So
And
you
it
did
is up
take it into account
to
that.
the two boards to present a referendum, and I believe it is up to the two boards to present a referendum to the voters and residents of the town and village of New Paltz to allow them to determine their fate. It is not up to the two governments to dictate to this community what their fate should be. I'm sorry we haven't done as well as we should have in trying to present all of this. It is very complicated, and we're doing the best that we can, but I do believe that we need to work together to discuss all the issues which aren't just financial, as Stuart pointed out last week. So the question becomes, what is the best way to proceed together to discuss these things and get them to the voters and give them the opportunity to ask their questions and as best we can to provide answers. People out there have very good ideas. Maybe some of them, the one that Mike found in terms of whether we actually need that extra 0.5 person is very good. That's helpful.
To answer your question, but a different way, okay, I can remember from the Human Resources Committee report, they identified a reduction of 7 or 8 employees, but they did not identify, to my knowledge, except the highway, where those reductions would be. Am I wrong in that?
No, they didn't.
No, in other words, they said, yeah, there's gonna be a reduction, okay, but they didn't really identify, except in the question of highway and buildings and ground, where reductions of people would be.
And they didn't even identify that, the towns identified that.
That's, yes.
I would just add that it is frustrating having to work with figures that are a year and a half old. But since the town consolidated the DPW and the highway department, we also went out and hired the same engineering firm that the village uses for water control and that kind of thing as consultants. And this is a brand new world for us. And we did that possibly anticipating a consolidation. It would be much easier to move into this kind of single entity monitoring those water and sewer problems. But we've only been in this situation now for maybe 6 months or so, and if the community chooses not to consolidate, then the town might, and we need to evaluate how well this new relationship is working. So I don't think it is so far-fetched to go with those old numbers, because this is new to the town, using an outside consultant for a lot of those services. And if we don't consolidate, the town may say, well, maybe we're better off going back with
But the
hiring
point
those
of that
employees.
specifically, okay, when you talk about, yes, we hired, the town hired those people to do those tests, et cetera, and so forth, which means go around the residents. Well, if we had one water district, you wouldn't need so many samples.
Dave, all
No,
I'm saying.
I just explained that for everybody else, okay? You know, I just explained that today you got
But
3 or 4 water
that's if
districts.
we're one community.
Yeah, in one community, you wouldn't have to take so many samples.
The town might need to go back and
Yep.
go back to the numbers of employees that we had prior to
Absolutely.
trying it this way.
Okay, yeah, okay, but even though we would continue to exist, if we continue to exist this way, okay, and you kept it, say, even though you're using the same company to do the tests, okay, you're doing more tests than you would in one community.
And we're probably making more emergency calls, and
Yeah.
you know, it's great not to
Okay,
have
all right,
to call
okay,
somebody
all right.
else.
Somebody had,
Okay, yes, somebody else have a question?
Can I just make it clear that I never said you could do without that .5. That was not my point.
No.
You need someone doing payroll. I mean, just paychecks isn't coming in and.
oh, no,
No, that's
the
the
village
0.5
has
person.
somebody that
Yes,
does
that's
payroll.
0.5 person, okay, today,
Okay.
that operation,
That's what I
okay,
heard.
that operation is done in this village operation here, okay?
Mhm.
And those people are here,
Yeah.
okay? So that's why when I came up and said 4.25, maybe that's too high, I don't know, okay? You know, it probably is, but, you know, that's the guess at the present time.
No, I didn't mean to imply that we didn't have a person, but we don't do it by hand.
Yeah, there has to be, that job has to be done, okay? Today it's done somewhere else, okay? That's all right. Okay, now, we are going down through, we've basically gone through, treasurer's office purchasing assessment. 77,947, kept the same, 77,947, no change. That is, about 1 in 6/10 people, I think. This fiscal agent thing was part of the consolidation. Clerk's office was law, okay? Is that? Personnel payroll, no, okay, this is the engineer, okay?
Do talk about law though, because that's very important and people
Okay,
get.
I'm sorry, all right, law, okay, all right.
Good.
174 was the total, and this is 95. And Sally, maybe one attorney on a retainer, okay, and $30,000 plus litigations. That's how we came up with this, and unless you've really been in town government or village government, you don't realize how many agreements and how many things that get tossed back and forth between the town and the village that you have to go out to get attorneys' comments and inputs. Whether it has to be with how are we going to fund public access, or who's responsible for Moriello Pool, or who's going to take care of the snow removal in this community if we decide to do some consolidation. That is all a problem that you have to involve the attorneys on. And when you do that, you don't involve one, but you involve two. Did you just get rid of them, okay? Question of notices to go out, have your approval attorney in most cases.
May I add a footnote?
Yes.
The village has an attorney on retainer. In 2011, and I think still, the town pays an hourly fee. The town does not have an attorney on retainer. That's number one. Two, in a town, whenever you form a district of any kind, there are legal fees involved. In the village, it is a benefit assessment district. You're adding two, you do not have to do bonding, you do not have to do all of the machinations, legal machinations required setting up a special district. Three, the village of New Paltz, in terms of development, has what are called escrow accounts, and that is if Mike and I decided that we wanted to build a development, okay, we would pay a certain amount of money into an escrow account which covers engineering and covers the legal fees required by the village of New Paltz for its planning board. The town does not function that way. That is why you see such a large difference in both the engineer and the law categories between the village and the town. And I certainly would recommend for a future government, should we be so lucky, is that attorneys be hired by retainer, and you always need to set aside a certain amount for litigation because the retainer covers day-to-day things but not litigation.
Yes.
Okay, couple things on this. One is that the way retainers work, my familiarity with retainers is they're for a certain amount of time. You get a discount. You're buying in bulk, so to speak, in terms of hours. But an attorney expects to make a certain amount per hour. And if they go a year and they gave you a deal and they ended up getting far less per hour, then they're going to give you a different rate or a different total amount of that retainer for the next year. They're not going to, it's not all you can eat. So
that has not been my experience in the village and historically in the village.
Well,
so,
this is
I mean,
basically how
your
attorneys
experience
work.
may, and you work for an
Okay.
attorney, I believe,
Well,
and
yes,
that's
but
a
you don't
different
work
kind of,
law.
that's a different situation.
Well, okay. Well, that's my first comment. Second is that that's not the notion of if you can save money using a retainer, then you can do that at any time. It's not really related to consolidation. You could do it now. It shouldn't be a consideration that enters in. This is 2011. It wasn't done. If you had merged, you still wouldn't have done it because that's just, apples to apples here.
Apples to apples, yes, you're exactly right, and yes, I would have done it.
Okay, but
Retainers are a very good thing.
okay, then you have to discount whatever you're starting with by the town because it's just not a consolidation savings. You could have done it again in 2011 in the town and done
Now,
it.
we're talking about a village form of government, remember. There are assumptions
I
driving.
don't think that matters in the point you're making about retainers.
Yes, it does matter. because a town's legal requirements, as opposed to a village's legal requirements, lend themselves, perhaps, to a different approach. Okay? The village does not have to form special districts. The village can, in a very, very comprehensive job description, if you will, or a request for bids, request for qualifications, I don't care what you call the document, can specify the areas that need legal attention that you know experientially are required. Please bid. If you bid and you meet all of this with the understanding, and most retainers have it, with the understanding of a qualifying clause that should there be a lawsuit, an Article 78, whatever, that is above and beyond. Most of them all say if there are labor issues that are not within the normal purview of a year, that is above and beyond. Standard retainer.
Just let
I
me,
still believe that is what I said in terms of that, and I'm not done, I have some more comments.
well,
but
just
Dave-
want to answer that, etc., you know. I cannot talk about what the mayor does today or what the supervisor did today. All cases, almost all, when I was supervisor 2 years ago, I almost had to go on every meeting, okay, and I never, to my knowledge, I didn't want an attorney there and have to pay for him in a meeting, okay? However, if there was something that was legal that we were talking about, I reviewed that agenda with him, okay, and said, you know, this is what's coming up, I got any legal issues in this situation we have to do, okay? Just remember, okay, that when you talk about consolidation, okay, that is not 2 meetings that you have to talk to the attorney about, you're only talking about 1, all right? It's a difference. There is also, and always was, a significant amount of legal issues between the town and the village, and there still are today, okay? And every year you've got these issues of town that require legal input, both from the village side and from the town side, and also from the question of reaching an agreement, all right? With a consolidated government, those issues disappear. And the meetings are only 1 instead of 2.
May I get a point of clarification?
Yeah.
In the conversation back and forth that you folks were having, as I understood, there were 2 separate issues, and I'm wondering whether those sort of got mushed together. What I was hearing, or what my understanding is that the point of consolidation saving fees was around what Dave was just talking about all the stuff that is no longer intergovernment issues. And it might be a lot easier, I don't know, I'm not an attorney, but it might be a lot easier to project a rational retainer once we get to a point, if we consolidate, where sort of daily business is daily business is daily business. And you know that other things happen and those aren't in the retainer and you don't pay for them until you have to pay, whatever it is. The fact that the town has an attorney on an hourly basis now, and the village has a retainer now, that the town could or couldn't do it differently is kind of like a separate issue, it seems. That's what I'm trying to get clear about.
Depends what that figure means, though.
Right.
That figure might be a lot lower for the town if they had a lawyer on retainer in 2011. So you can't reflect it as savings.
Well, I think that the town has a lot of land use legislation. You know, we have a wetlands law, so we would have to have several different attorneys on retainer, because we use different attorneys for different aspects of the legislation we're working on. So, in fact, that's why at our reorg meeting every year, we appoint up to 4 different attorneys. One advantage of consolidation is that a lot of that very expensive land use legislation could become community-wide. The village has not yet passed a wetlands law, and so that's an expense that could become community-wide, and the village would not have to do it. But I don't think that for the retainer that the village budgets for every year, you will see the same kind of variety and diversity of legislation that the town has had to pay for. And that's a large reason why we haven't gone down the retainer route.
Maybe that explains, I guess some of us don't really understand why the town spends so much more for lawyers.
Okay.
And
Is that
you're giving me
Okay.
a reason why.
Okay.
If I may, the thing about a retainer, you're buying a block of time. And every time you call your attorney who's on retainer, he just pushes a little button and he starts the clock running. Now, what I'm presuming the town does, I hope they do, is they sit down and they say, okay, last year we spent $100,000, I'm just using a figure, please, $100,000 on attorneys. A retainer would have cost us $200,000, he wants $200,000, and we get the same block of time. It could be cheaper to pay for as you need than a retainer. And that's the key. So you can't really say that had the town been on retainer place, they would have saved less money. It could have cost them more money because they could have hit the retainer, and then they'd have to pay over and above the retainer anyway. So the retainer, because what happens in a lot of cases when you're on retainer is people, who have attorneys on retainer tend to pick up the phone every now and then. Oh, I got them on retainer. It's not costing me anything until they hit the $2,000 retainer mark, and then they get a bill for $600. Right. So you really can't say that it would be less.
I guess
That's all I'm saying.
very speculative then, I'm not sure.
Well, you can,
Yeah.
because number one,
Well, if this figure, what it really means.
No, it just means, as Dave pointed out, that where a savings will come into effect is that you won't have the two governments going back and forth, back and forth. This guy, the town sends an MOA. Okay, fine, but the village looks at it, says, I don't like it, gives it to their attorney. They come back, they send it back, it goes back to the town. The town says, I don't like that, goes to their attorney. So the same memorandum of understanding can go back 5 times.
Right, but that's $79,000 worth of cost.
We look at the cost of it. Look at the cost. Look at the cost of attorneys for the town. I mean, the town, as Kitty so adequately put it, has a lot of land use issues which the village doesn't have, and that's not something that could be done. There's just researching the current laws that are constantly changing on land issues has got to be a major job. So all I'm saying is that you can't say the town would have been less. However, this is what the town paid. We looked at it and we said, if there's one attorney, we're going to save. And I don't know how many MOUs have gone back and forth between the town and the village. And I know that every time they do, they go back 4 and 5 times. And every time you do that, it's a cost.
and special districts are.
Yeah, I'm just saying, yeah. So is this a subjective? Yeah, but you just can't say it's low.
Let me ask you the question, is this? The question, do you have any idea what would your suggested savings would be?
Well,
There's a savings here, you recognize that there's a saving.
I'll give you some savings, yes.
Okay.
Let's remember, we got a planning board and a zoning board as well as the municipal board, right? The town board or village board.
That's all the question to you, okay.
Yeah, no, but you made this point. You made the point. A lot of the arguments that I you've had. You folks have had in meetings.
I just,
And your point, Dave, was that you're still gonna have, I got the quote. You said, you're not gonna have, let's face it, you're not gonna have less developments, you're not gonna have less requests for changes on variances and so forth. Even though those boards are combined to one board, that board itself will have more work to do. So therefore, rather than having a meeting once a month or twice a month, they're gonna have to have more meetings than that. You're talking about the zoning and the planning boards.
You can say
When did I say this? When did I say that? Curiosity. One of the meetings we had
It was,
originally discussing this?
October
Yeah, okay, that's
October
possible, yeah.
15th.
Yeah,
is,
okay.
Minute 24, 33 seconds.
Yeah, that's right, okay. We had some of those
Watch
stale
the
arguments, so
videos.
we did,
That's,
okay.
you know, Kitty says, watch
Yeah.
the videos. Sal,
Yeah, that's right,
Susan
okay,
said,
you're
watch the
right,
videos.
okay.
I'm sorry. I
I-
don't mean to embarrass. I'm just.
No,
putting the
no,
facts
you
that
know,
I-
this is part of the situation, it was,
Okay.
the discussion, and this is kinda like what the committee, but I asked you the question. I think you recognize, okay, at least I hope you recognize, okay, that consolidation of the community, okay, means that we need less legal advice.
Yes, and I
And-
do accept the
How much less?
argument you said, but I think to say that it will be less than even the town's itself spent.
What would you suggest, how much would you say, with what's it, 79,000 up there? Okay,
Yes,
what,
yeah.
what do you think it should be, 50?
No, I think he has to go back and check the town legal fees for planning, okay? Because Mike, you're gonna be surprised,
would
okay?
say
I want you to go and
save
see who pays
30,000.
for the planning board legal fees
Saving,
in the town, who pays for the ZBA legal fees in the town.
well,
And
that'd be a
then
way
come
to
back
try
and
to
tell us
get-
your figure.
get-
Hmm?
Let's see what the costs are per board, and that would.
But
be
ours
the way
are
to get-
in escrow for planning board and town, okay, and for ZBA. So your task is going to be, okay, that you
That's not my
will,
task.
excuse
It's
me,
your folks' task. You
no
go
it is
looking at these
not.
numbers.
You are doubting, therefore it's your job to show me we're
Well,
wrong.
I'd like to
No,
hear,
no.
I'd like to hear, I'd like to hear, okay, you know?
Well, from what
I'd
I
like your
hear,
input.
it looks to me, I would take that, if I had to throw out a number now, I would say 30,000 in savings. You have 79.
Would
What
you
I
like
did-
to bet dinner?
You'd say $30,000, okay, all right, thank you for your input. Okay, all right.
It seems to
What?
me that
No,
the
I'm just-
issues for these meetings are maybe the dollars and cents, but it's also your explanation of how you arrived at what you arrived at.
Yes?
And again, these costs are ancient history.
Yes, they are.
And all of these costs are somewhat soft in regard to what effort will need to be expended to merge governments in the future if that's the way we go. So I appreciate
I-
your explanations of
In
your
other words,
method.
in other words, we say that, for example, okay, the total budget between the things would be $7 million, and I don't remember what that figure was right now. But actually, when you do that budget for 2015, for example, okay, the budget's not gonna be $7 million, it's gonna be $9 million. And that's why I said in the beginning here, we're looking at 18% per year of retirement rates going up. We're looking at 10 to 15% or more medical going up, right? Expenses going up, not to mention the question of fuel and all the rest of those
Right,
things, okay?
exactly.
But I think it's important, okay, for us to try to understand where there are opportunities, okay, to do less work, okay? And
More efficient.
and therefore, either spend less money for employees or less money for contract workers or all of that data. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question about the 79,000, because I don't necessarily think that it would be as low as 30,000, and I imagine that you came up with the 79,000 from somewhere, so what did you tabulate to come up with the 79?
Well, first you have to understand, we are working from the assumption of accepting the efficiency committee's recommendation of a town-wide village form of government. Okay. So that automatically directs certain things in terms of what you spend money and how you spend it. So if you're not spending money on legal fees for developers with the planning board.
No, I
Okay.
completely understand
Yeah.
the exercise, and I actually think you could even strengthen your argument further by talking about this retainer concept in the village. And so instead of your attorney who is on retainer and who is spending time on intermunicipal agreements, you could say, well, the time that he or she saved not fooling around with intermunicipal agreements, he was working on some of the land use issues that Kitty brought up. So that's another way that you could identify potential savings. But the $79,000 number must have come from somewhere. I'm just wondering, like, what did you?
What's that came from? The 95. So there was a 95. Well, from in the October meeting, originally it was 75, and Dave argued that it should be 100,000, but it was sort of a compromise made it.
Right.
No, I understand the math of
That
taking
is
two
correct.
numbers and
Yes, you know,
subtracting them.
the chairmans don't get a chance to win all the arguments. We try, but we can't always win.
It's
Michael, let me ask you a question, seriously. What do you think the savings would be? Just because you gave 35. I'm not holding you to anything, but 3 points I want to make. One, you'd be reducing one town or village attorney, because you won't need two. You'll be reducing one planning board attorney, because you don't need two. You'll be reducing one ZBA attorney, because you don't need two. Now, I don't know if the village has a labor attorney or not.
No.
Okay, because now say there you'd be reducing another attorney. So, I mean, just those three attorneys' reductions alone.
Well,
It's gonna be a-
that was your point back then, and you're consistent with it. Dave's point, though, was that,
Oh, well,
yes, but the planning board and the zoning board will have to meet more, and if you have one attorney, that attorney has to show up more, so the same, basically, the billing hours in.
Well,
remains
no,
the
Yeah,
same.
but-
no,
really,
that's you're making this my point. Okay. The taxpayers don't pay for the planning board attorney
Well,
and
they
the
should.
and the zoning board attorney
They
in
should.
the village.
Well,
The
they don't.
developers do.
They don't. The only time when the taxpayers pay for those is if it's legislation that comes from the town or village. So when, for example, the chicken law. The town paid an attorney and the village paid an attorney to research
See you tomorrow morning?
Bye-bye.
poultry and livestock laws that might work for the town and or the village. Those are generated by the town or the village, and so therefore taxpayers do pay for that.
Mm-hmm.
There's no escrow for that. That's actually a pretty good example of only having
Duplication.
one attorney.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right, duplication.
Well, it's
Yeah.
a pretty good example of the fact that the town and village did get together and pay one attorney to research it for both of them.
Because no village attorney has the authority to draft a law for the town outside the village.
Well,
We would have to.
researching law and drafting a law are two different functions.
Well, no, hold it.
She raised it.
She's
yeah.
right on,
Point,
because
she's
the
right
point
on.
is this, if you couldn't draft the same law for the village that you could with the town, okay, because village ordinance and village state law is probably different than town law, okay? And then therefore,
Fine.
you know, you
Okay.
might, you know, you'd have to do the same work, okay? Whether it was one attorney or two attorneys in a drafting of such an item, because he has to go through the village state law, okay, to see what's applicable and what's not applicable, and the town law, what's might be applicable, because the situation is when any type of major thing like this, expect it to be challenged. Period.
The same thing would be true of the fracking laws.
Okay, all right.
Well,
all right.
we discussed this enough. I think there's gonna be a theme here in terms of me feeling like you folks are making too much of the amount of time spent intramurally, so to speak.
Okay?
And you're comfortable, and that's a difference of,
Okay.
All we're trying to do, please correct me if I'm wrong, is we want to, everybody asked us what our reasoning was and what our thinking was. And that's what we're trying to.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's not, you gotta follow what we're saying. We're just saying, this is our reasoning. You now understand the logic that we use. You better make a decision. It's easier for you to understand. You may not agree, which is your prerogative as tax,
Right.
but at least you understand where we came from.
Yeah.
But I also think that we need to understand where Mike is coming from,
Yeah.
and he is coming from the concept of maintaining two governments.
No.
You said shared services you
Well, I
favored.
think that
Shared services.
That
Yeah.
implies
Yeah.
two governments.
But I never represented myself as that.
Oh, I thought you
I
said
think
last
if
week.
If we see, well, no, I asked about shared services because I feel like everything should be on the table. I'm still a believer in what the Fair Weather report basically outlined. And I feel like the savings, the Fair Weather report said is there's not a lot of savings because the duplication is not great. And you do save around the corners, but there are other good reasons to consider consolidation.
There's quite a lot of savings
There are
up
good
there on
reasons
that board. There's quite a lot of savings up there on that board.
Yeah.
And
So
if you
shared services.
and if you're
is
gonna
all the
quote-
brand.
What?
Right.
We have all these
Exactly.
MOUs that have still not been we don't seem able to do shared services in a lot of instances.
and that's not just this board. That has historically been true
No, so,
for 40 years that I've lived in the board.
I mean, it's the, and coming to these meetings as a citizen, even if I was not involved in consolidation or any of the issues that are, immediately at hand, it's like, and we've only lived here 4 years, but for 4 years this has been going on.
Well, you used to have two
And it's-
police,
I would just like
police,
to.
and now you have one, and
Well,
that's
actually, that's a really great example of
Two-
why
I'm sorry,
there
two
is
what?
resistance to police forces, of why there is resistance to more shared services, because, in fact, that's not a shared service anymore, that was completely transferred to the town aid budget, so there's no, agreement that has to be signed or contract that has to be signed. And that was done, 30 or 40 years ago, when the entire police force was, I think, 8 people. And in those days, rather than have shared services, we have one combined police force. And you'll note in many of our discussions that there is a lot of pushback from the town outside the village residents who now feel that the balance of paying for that particular service is unfairly placed upon the town taxpayers. So I think for the major services that have been consolidated, that don't require an intermunicipal agreement now, are the police, the library,
Assessor,
the assessor,
recreation.
justice,
Recreation,
And-
youth program,
well, the
Justices.
has its own recreation.
justices.
The
court
justices.
system.
Justice,
are
yeah.
each one. And those have all, they're not shared services in the sense that you're talking about, where we sign a contract every year.
Well,
They are simply absorbed into the town aid fund. But in order to consolidate any future programs like DPW or, well, let's just do DPW, that I suspect would not be a welcome addition to the town aid fund if the governments do not consolidate. I don't think that the town would automatically vote to accept the entire village DPW into the aid fund. So we would be back to 2 lawyers, a lot of meetings, everybody sitting around this table saying, no, we're only gonna plow this far. And, so,
Well, don't give me
that
that thing.
There
This
was
is the
quite
thing, we had
a-
this big snow and I came out and I came down Henry Du Bois and here was this town truck that came out of, I think, Mill Rock, it's in the town, okay? Got to the end of it, picked up his plow, and went on the rest of the way down Henry Du Bois because that's in its village and I can't
Yeah.
plow that.
it doesn't.
I mean-
it's
So
not-
that's your, that's,
right.
that's,
That's shared
not shared
services.
services, though, that's two
That's-
different.
No,
Services,
but,
that's-
you know, that's the type of.
But that would be the major service next to talk about consolidating.
Well-
If we don't consolidate governments, a lot of people have said it would make sense to have a shared services agreement for highway. And,
I don't want to attend those meetings.
Fair weather report, which is a very small, budget compared to that.
Okay, all right,
Okay.
I think we can move on. Let's see, we are down to, we went down through, law, and engineer,
Yep,
and that's where we stopped, I think.
yep.
Okay,
We didn't do engineers.
Yes, we
I
did,
think engineer's gonna be the same conversation.
as
law.
an attorney. But
Well, that doesn't mean we shouldn't have it. I mean, no, engineer's a different conversation, because engineer, almost no village expense in 2011 for engineer. It's all
Exactly.
town.
And the reason being that most of the engineering in the village, which is what I can speak to, water and sewer is not paid for by the taxpayers, it is paid for by the users. Okay?
Okay.
Engineering fees, the bulk of our engineering fees in the village are water and sewer. Okay?
Okay.
Planning, engineering for a developer is paid through escrow. The village taxpayers do not pay for engineering costs, they are paid for by the developer. Okay? That's the difference right there.
Town.
So
So-
the reason the town line is so high is, I'm sure you've heard of sewer 6.
Yes.
Okay. We have a big problem up there, and it's just not been possible to bill the, 45 residents of that area, the full engineering costs of the disastrous situation that they've inherited. That doesn't account for the whole $135,000, but there are a lot of, again, land use issues that come from the town that that can't be billed to developers, that don't go through the planning board, that are town generated. I suspect this year, if we're talking about 2011, it was probably still paying for 2010 wetlands. I think Lent Drive had some issues. So there are a lot of things that come from a town planning perspective that are town generated, that that the town taxpayer pays for, that are not paid for by developers. I think that in a consolidated government, a lot of that has been done. It's been paid for, and the single community that would result would benefit from not having to go through those planning issues again.
What do you mean a lot of it's been paid for?
Because
Because again, we're focusing on 2011, so what would happen if the two municipalities were together, combined in 2011, how does we get from down to 50,000 from
Well,
137,000?
in 2010, and since we're talking about expenditures in 2011, I'm assuming a lot of this came from paying our attorney, our engineer to help us work on our town master plan. So whether or not that ever gets adopted, a lot of his work, he did a tremendous amount of surveying of wetlands and that kind of stuff. That's all done. If we become one community, we have the benefit of that work that can just be a new, what is the planning layer, or you impose a new layer of something.
Overlay?
Yes.
You're
Not lay
welcome.
overlay. Right.
Okay, so the problem that I have, following what you said, Kitty, is that it's being counted as savings, you see, and really it's like a one-shot kind of situation. That, you're saying that's out of its way. It's not really consolidation
well,
savings. There's no, this
Right,
is.
okay, I just want to answer
Yeah.
that because, if we don't consolidate and we have to each go back to the drawing planning board and do separate master plans, then we do have to give that
No,
in.
I'm gonna check.
Because we're still planning for, you know, a town that is outside the village, so we're planning for the donut, and then the village will pay to plan for the
Let
whole.
me ask it a different way. Is this operational savings, this 86,971, is it operational savings, meaning, you know, that it's a recurring
That's what I'm gonna
savings?
check, because I believe, and I did not actually write it down, I believe that the engineering costs are consistent for the town at that figure. In other words, it isn't a one-time 2011 expense. The engineering fees for the town are proportional.
Okay.
We'll go back and we'll.
And I'm
look
gonna, I'm
back
gonna go and check.
And we'll
And then-
respond to
and
that
then-
next
Okay,
week,
and
okay?
then, so I can then ask a follow-up question.
Sure, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Are there any other questions, Steve? Any other input, comment? Okay. Next Monday night, we will get into the interesting discussion.
What's next?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh,
If
we're
anybody wants
Oh,
to
that's it for
ask
tonight.
anything,
So we're going down further.
Yeah, we'll close the meeting at this point.
Okay.
yeah, we'll close the meeting, but
I just wanna say, I mean, I think it's obvious to you